the Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook, talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.
So welcome to the Green Room. This is a show where we look at all the latest news and hot topics from within the driving instructor industry. And as always, I am your jolly northern host, Terry Cook, and I'm delighted to be here. But you will be delighted to know that it's not just me, because I am also joined by the man who 100% insists that none of his learners read the highway code, Chris Benstead. How are we doing, Chris?
I'm awesome. All is good.
Excellent. And I'm also joined by some of my lovely premium members who have come along to watch and potentially insert some wisdom into this otherwise wisdomless podcast. We are going to get into the news because there's a little bit of news, not a massive amount this month, but we've got some to tackle. But later on, we're going to be taking a bit of a dive into the Instructor Podcast because I have just finished season 5, and this is the 30th episode of the Green Room. So I am going self-indulgent a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about the podcast and potentially the training in the industry as a whole. But there is a little bit of news to begin with. I'm going to kick off with the BLR, that's one of the ones I remember, actually, acronym, Big Learner Relay. It's back for its final outing this year, but they have now opened registration. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes. If you have any interest in partaking or helping with a BLR, then you can register your interest. So Chris, as a member of the BLR inner sanctum, any thoughts, anything you want to add to that, or is it quite simple, just that?
It's just that. No, it is. It's a registration list of showing your interest. It doesn't have to mean, lead car. It can be that, if you don't feel confident being the lead car all on your own, which isn't how it works. There's a load of people around you that you can gather together and do stuff. But you could still register and sort of back someone up. So there's an option there. But if Lou doesn't know that you're interested, then there's less chance of it coming to your doorstep. So, if you want to rally the troops locally, register yourself on the link, because then she knows where the interest is and she will do her best to make the route fit. Can't see everybody, can't go everywhere, but we'll definitely have a look at the map and see what is achievable. So we are hoping for an epic final year. If you haven't done it before, it's your last chance. So get registered. And if it doesn't come to your doorstep, plan a tax deductible holiday to come along and join it somewhere else. Be a nice trip away with, leaving the kids at home.
Yeah, we could have got that in last week, and then I could have asked Dave Shannon of Drive Head Bookkeeping about that on the special day for my premium members the other day. There will be an accompanying podcast as well. The podcast will be back for its final season with that. I will open up the Instructor Podcast page on that again at some point. But if you want to go back and check out the previous episodes of that, if you go to instructorpodcast.com, click on the free stuff tab, and not only will you find all the free stuff I do, but you'll find links to loads of other industry podcasts as well, including the BLR one. But moving on, because the DVSA have gone into mock test mode again. There seems to be a bit of impetus around pushing mock tests, and they released their survey results from the mock test. So this isn't the same survey as when they ask what we want and then do the opposite. This is the survey where they asked if we were using mock tests and how we were getting on and that kind of stuff. I don't think there's anything particularly that stood out that's worth mentioning from that survey, but I will put a link in the show notes again, so if anyone wants to go and peruse it, then feel free. But anything you want to mention about the survey or anything around that, Chris?
No, I just would like the language to change around mock testing, because I think we've all got an idea of what we think it means. And until we're actually all talking the same, and I don't think we're talking the same as the DVSA, different people are going to have different opinions because they're talking about something different. That doesn't make sense. So I think, are we looking at assessments? Are we looking at a dress rehearsal and, and what that is? So I think there's this catch-all phrase and it causes confusion. So just an opportunity to say that yet again, but I'll keep saying it and we'll keep carrying on as we are.
But I managed to jump on one of the recent webinars I did on mock tests, and it was Graham O'Brien, and I'm really annoyed. I've forgotten the other lady's name, and she's been on the podcast as well from the DVSA. I want to say Amanda Lane, but I've got a feeling I might have got that wrong. But they did a brilliant job. I thought that the webinar they did was superb. I thought the initial presentation was clear and concise and answered a lot of questions anyway. But then the Q&A that followed, some of the questions that were given to them were actually quite tricky, I thought, for them to answer. And they answered them really well, and I thought quite comprehensively. So, if you do get a chance to go and watch one of those, I would recommend it, because I picked up some things from there. But, ultimately, the purpose of the DVSA's idea of a mock test is to improve the pass rate. And the only reason they want to improve the pass rate is to reduce the backlog on tests. That's the sole reason. We can't hide from that. We might have a slightly different reason. And, I'll give you my take on mocks. I don't want to dive into this too much because we've covered it before, but I offer them. There's times I've used them as a tool previously. And I think that when I've done that, it's been like, if someone, not necessarily been arguing, but if someone's been debating whether they should go ahead with a test or not, that's when I've used it. I'm like, how about we go and do this mock test and we'll see how we get on? And the interesting thing I found a couple of times is that I've been lacking, because you go for a mock test and you're forced to shut up. And it's not that they go to pieces, but afterwards I've had a couple of people that have said to me, oh, it felt weird without your help. And I'm like, interesting. Am I giving more help than I think I am? And then it's kind of, it makes me assess my own performance. So that mock test I've also found beneficial for me, but I don't think I've had anyone I've insisted on a mock test. And I don't think I've had anyone that I've had argue about it afterwards. And I think the only times I've used it, I found it beneficial. So, but I am curious, Chris, what are your thoughts on mock tests other than what you've mentioned already?
I think that part of the issue, part of my concern from that is that I don't know if I use them in the same way. I think I do have different kind of levels of what I do. On the odd occasions that I'm in a car, I'd put that caveat in. But the little bits that we do where we're kind of assessing and challenging, and then we identify something we need to go and address. It's when all right, so you think that they're kind of you've covered all of that syllabus, so you've got the stuff you can tick off as subjects, and we know that we've got that cooking time, that the development and everything else, which is very non-tangible. When it happens, and it happens differently for different people. But sometimes you do go, I don't know what we've got to look at now, because I don't really know what's needed. So we'll start doing something, and then we'll identify it and we'll address it. And I suppose in my head that comes under, we're going to start doing a mock in totally independent drive without my input. Let's head off somewhere, and then we'll adapt as we go. And like all good, standards check trainer, we will change the plan, we'll change the goal, all of that stuff. So I kind of feel that fits into my mock, which is to simulate them totally independently, as in that's what the test is about. Put them through the thing that are likely to come up. I'm also not very test focused, so I use it as not an excuse, as a justification of being test focused. So I'll use it in that way. So I think, I just wonder whether that makes me kind of look at it a little bit differently, and therefore the lines aren't joining up. I'd be really interested if other people find that same, kind of, they don't necessarily feel that they're talking the same language as the DVSA. I rarely do, but just in this particular situation.
Yeah, and I think I use them. I think I've said this before. I'm going to say it again. That I use them, what I call spot mocks or mini mocks, and an example that always springs to mind is manoeuvres. We'll have the student doing them independently, and then I'll chuck in. I'll say, "How about we do it as if you're on a test?" And all of a sudden, you see him get to which I'm like, "There's no difference You've literally just done it with me sat here in silence. It's just that now I'm going to tell you whether you're to pass or fail afterwards. But they immediately feel more pressure, and I find that fascinating that they're doing literally nothing different, but they immediately feel that pressure. But I did notice on the webinar, Graham referred to them, and I think he might have even called it a spot mock, which I was a bit like, you've listened to the podcast and you've stolen that. At least give me credit. Speaking of giving people credit, I wasn't going to mention this, but I'm gonna, because I'm not going off on a tangent by saying it now. My driving school is TC Drive, and over the years, I've had various pieces of content out on the instructor and on TC Drive and on my personal page. And I used to run a page years ago for I can't remember what it's called, but it was about self-development. Anyway, and I've had content stolen. Everyone gets content stolen where it's just copy and pasted and stuff like that. But I'm just going to say this: if any driving instructors listening, please share each other's stuff by all means, but don't copy and paste it. It's just cheap and tacky. And a big shout out to Kev Brooker, who seems to have made it a bit of a mission to go and tag me on all the posts where people have stolen my content and just copy and paste it, which is lovely. But yes, I had a post that went viral on TC Drive, and it's quite impressive. And I've not had one go viral like that for a long time, and just noticed that loads of people have just copied and pasted it as well, which I don't know. I find it a little bit frustrating. It's a backhanded compliment, but I'm a bit like, give people credit where it's due. Anyway, I don't want to moan too much, so let's move on to what I consider good news, and that is the Instructor Meginar that's coming up on the 3rd of August. Now, if you haven't come across this yet, this is 9 speakers delivering 20-minute presentations across roughly 3 hours, or probably overrun slightly. So yeah, and that is on the 3rd of August. To sign up for more details and to get links and stuff like that, you'll need to sign up to the Instructor Podcast newsletter, which you can find links in the show notes or on the website. But I have a few guests that have been announced already. I'm drip feeding these out over the next few weeks, but the ones that have been announced so far: Stuart Lockery, knowledgeable instructor training. Stuart is talking about training in the industry and how we can be better and ignoring the DVSA. Kit are taking us back to the future and looking at how instructors can lead rather than be led. Laura Joyce is talking to us about social media, why and how we can do it and the difference it can make. Got Elizabeth Box coming in to talk about pre-driver education. And we have also got the man who tells his students to 100% ignore the highway code, Chris Benstead, coming to talk about the theory test. So, Chris, how's that Meginar shaping up for you?
Well, I've spent this week rewriting the highway code. So yeah, maybe it was just clickbait. You never know. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be great fun. Why is it when I hear Meginar, I think of Godzilla? I've just got this. I don't know. There's some kind of either that or it's Power Rangers, and that's not a bad thing. Power Rangers film, thoroughly underrated. It's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it, and it's rare, just because I know lots of the people that do it. It's rare that I want to listen to everybody else who's speaking, and I want to listen to everybody else who's speaking. So yeah, I think it could be really good. It will be really good. Sorry, not could be.
I mean, 2 or 3 people have seen like a draft of guests, but I revealed to you before I press record today the full list. So you're the only person that's seen that full list, and I am really, really chuffed with the people that have agreed to come on. Admittedly, everyone I've asked to come on has said yes. So it's not like I've had to go and find other people, but the 9 that are there are all my first choice for that 9 for this particular thing. And I'm just really, really chuffed with the people that are doing it. There's some that, look, I'll be honest, that I would almost be surprised if I didn't say yes. So I include you in this. You're someone that wanted to get on to talk about the theory test. I think if you would have said no, go screw yourself, I'd have been a bit, that wasn't see that one coming. But there's other people in there that I'm just genuinely chuffed. So just regards to the lineup, obviously I've named the ones that I can name so far. what do you think of that lineup? Do you think it's a good mixture? Do you think that you said you want to see more? Do you think it's a good mixture for the industry?
I think it's a Terry Cook mix. And I think it's the thing that from the beginning of the podcast, and one of the reasons that I was keen to get involved was that you don't necessarily pick the ones that you would expect. The same old. You can't get rid of me, but it's I think it's a nice mix and variety. It's not always what's expected, and because of that, I think it's going to be great. So yeah, I think anyone who doesn't turn up is mad, because it's free and it's going to be a serious variety show. If you like Britain's Got Talent, it's going to be the Britain's Got Talent. We're going to have buzzers, and no, we're not. It's fine.
Oh, we are now. That's
I've got one.
Yeah,
I use it in my PDI training.
It'll be like the 6 for 60, but just putting people off. No, I mean, I appreciate that, and I'll we'll come back on maybe to the Terry Cook mix a little bit later on in the show, but I will just throw out there that places are limited, so there is a limited number of people that come along and watch it. So, and that's not me just trying to sell it, by the way, but places are literally limited because I cannot afford to go and pay for like an enterprise version of Zoom that costs $1,000. So I'm having to pay for the smaller one to give you guys it for free. But get a few hundred people there, so make sure you sign up to that newsletter, because that's where the links and stuff will be. But yeah, I will be keeping you all updated. So make sure you're checking out the newsletter and social media and stuff around there. But any other news this month, Chris? Anything else that we could do with touching on?
I don't think there's been a lot going on, is there? It's been relatively quiet, which is a good thing. Everyone's really busy, so that keeps it quiet. There haven't been that many Facebook rounds going on. So yeah, no, I think that sounds like about everything, unless I've forgotten something I was supposed to be saying.
Particularly, I mean, you said there's not been that many Facebook rounds. I've seen a few good ones. I've also noticed that recently I've seen, and this has amused me greatly, and it's a complete aside, but I'm going to say it. When we see the students in the learner group that ask a question, and the answer that certain instructors will give is read the highway code. I've noticed more and more of those instructors asking questions in instructor groups. I'm like, just read the book or read the national. I'm like, oh, screw you all. Anyway, let's take a moment to set the table then before I move on. So, Chris, do you want to take a moment to tell people who you are, what you do, and why you advise your students not to read the highway code?
It's not going to drop, is it? I am Chris Benstead, and I am the co-founder of the Driving Instructor and Trainers Collective, the DITC, which is the signposting platform for the driving instructor industry. If you're looking for something, then come and ask us, and then we'll tell you to talk to Terry and find out which podcast to listen to, or we'll tell you to, who to get in touch with in your area to find standards check training, or and if there's an association that represents something or provides something that would be a benefit to you. Careers development is the one that I keep talking to people about at the moment, because they want to do more, but they don't know what. They want a bit more variety, because I think the learner thing is proving a bit repetitive. So that is my official role and title when I'm here. But I also do theory training, as Theory Test Explained, which is where I haven't actually told any of my pupils to read the highway code. But that's because if you read it, it doesn't mean you understand it. So it's not that we ignore it, it's that that's not the best way to address it. So I'm not against the highway code, although make sure you don't buy one of the fake ones off of Amazon, because they've got wrong bits in them.
And if you were to listen to the 5-minute theory, I think I expressed a similar opinion on that. In the information is in there, but I don't learn very well by sitting reading a book from cover to cover. I would learn more by asking someone and engaging on that. So, but anyway, that's another topic for another day. Potentially a podcast episode back on episode 2 of season 5, but whatever. You are listening to The Green Room. This is the 30th edition of The Green Room, and it coincides nicely with the end of season 5. So all I'm going to say, first of all, is thank you all for listening. Make sure that if you want more instructor goodness, you check out the premium content. You can find all the stuff over there at www.instructorpodcast.com, where I have just announced the lineup, the official lineup for the remaining expert sessions for the year. So far, we have had Chris Spencer come in to deliver a session on how we teach roundabouts, which caused an almighty fuss online by some very miserable people. We had Kev Tracey Field on how to help our learners stay calm on test day, which did not cause a fuss online. So I blame you for that, Chris, clearly now, because we also had Dave Shannon, who recently come on to talk about tax. All brilliant sessions, expert sessions so far. And the remainder for the year, we've got Neil Whiteman coming in August to deliver a presentation on safeguarding. We have got Ray Seagrave coming in September to talk about building rapport. He did give me a more complex title, but I've forgotten it. And we've got our very own Phil Cowley coming in October to talk about our presentation on questioning techniques. We've also got some other stuff lined up. So we have got episode dissections coming up. We have got other green rooms, all this stuff being recorded live. So you get access to all this if you sign up to the £22 tier of the Instructor Podcast Premium, or if you're more interested in just receiving the recorded bonus content, sign up to the £10 tier. But either way, let's move on, because as said, I want to get a little bit self-indulgent for a moment, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. So the first thing I'm going to say is the polar opposite to self-indulgence, because I'm going to take a moment to thank everyone. So we're 5 seasons in, there's 145 episodes over 5 seasons and 30 editions of the Green Room. There's 85 guests that have come on. We've done live events now, or been part of live events at the Intelligent Instructor Expos. There's premium content with a whole host of additional guests as well. And there's webinars and Meginars and all this kind of stuff. So all that stuff over there. So for anyone that's listened, anyone that's shared, anyone that's commented, genuinely thank you. Really appreciate it. And for all the guests. And I was having a little flick back through today at the guests that have been on, and looking outside of the industry for a minute, people like Chris Brooker, comedian and wrestling coach, Sabini Roberts, come on to talk about the LGBTQ plus community and how we can be better allies. Dan Meredith, the most recent guest on the podcast. You look at these people, and I've obviously missed off an awful lot there, but the quality of these people that are willing to come in and give up their time and offer us expertise on a specific, topic that we can then take into our world and we can use in our world and share within our world. I just think it's a genuinely awesome thing that these guys have done in giving up their time. And obviously the people in the industry that are doing it as well. I've got 2 that have been on the show on it today. It's Chris, obviously, a regular. I'll come back to you in a second, but Phil Cowley's watching. He's been on the podcast before, and he's recently taken over the ADI Book Club over in the Instructor Podcast Facebook group, and a grand job he's doing over there as well. But, I want to take a moment here to thank you as well, Chris, because back on season 1, you use this little news roundup at the end of every episode from the DITC. In fact, I'm going to take a moment to point out that if you don't ask, you don't get. So I inquired with Chris, how do you fancy doing a little news segment? And I'd never spoken to Chris before. It's like, yeah, all right. Came and did it for season 1. Then we spoke about it. We decided to do the Green Room and did it weekly, but Chris was coming in every other week. And then I realized weekly was too much. I cannot do 2 weekly shows. So it went to monthly. And I think since then, you've been a pretty much solid guest. So thank you in particular for your time, Chris. So before I get into anything else around my thoughts on it, I'm keen to ask, I'm going to come to you, Chris. I'm keen to ask you for kind of an overall thought on the podcast, and feel free to be as negative as you want.
I don't know. I genuinely believe it's one of, if not, top of the tree for breadth of resources for the real instructor stuff, the stuff that bothers us day to day, that is relevant to us. Yes, anyone will turn up to the opening of something to do with standards check, because there's a threat there. But actually, when it comes to development and interest, it takes more to get us there. We need something that works. And I think you do an underrated job, an incredibly good job of choosing what that is, representing it, and it shows that you are to the core a driving instructor and that you get it, but that you actually manage to do something a lot of instructors don't do, which is looking outside, looking outwards, not looking inwards. And you're not DVSA focused. You're happy to engage with them, but that's not where the focus is. And I think you do a cracking job. And I'd say that even if I didn't like you.
Appreciate that. And it's worth mentioning here that when I kind of say about being self-indulgent, I am also trying to be very objective and almost non-judgmental. When the stuff I'm talking about now, I'm trying to be factual rather than opinionated, because I do think that the Instructor Podcast has made a bit of a difference to the industry, and I know it's helped a lot of people, and it's helped. This is the thing I'm most proud of, actually. It's helped instructors find people to work with. That was one of the big goals when I started off the show. Was I wanted to showcase talent. I wanted to showcase other instructors and people outside the industry, so that when someone is going, I don't know where to turn, they can just have a scroll through the podcast. I got to like this guy. I'm going to go find out more about him. I'm going to go, whatever. And the highlight of my week is always when I get one of my guests message me and say, so and so just come to me for this. It's like that's always the highlight, So I'm really, pleased about that. I think the question I want to ask you as well, and I kind of said there about be as negative as you want, but I kind of want to ask you, and is there any negatives? Is there anything that because you've been a listener since episode 3 when you tuned in yourself to join me. Has there anything that you didn't like, or that you would change, or that you get what I mean? Is there anything you weren't happy with the podcast?
I have an issue with the accountability, because you remember what I say and you throw it back at me. We won't mention the one episode where I really didn't like it, and then you told them, and then you raised it with me numerous times when it went addressed, because I'm sure you remember who it was. Yes, there were those moments. No, I think the lovely thing is you can turn the bloody thing off, which is sometimes a lovely thing. But you don't have to listen. As you said, you can choose which ones you go to. You're not expecting people to listen to every single one. It'd be lovely if people do. But I like the fact that it's not just a filler between driving lessons of something to put on in the background. It's actually something you sit down with and engage with. You can take it seriously. It's not throwaway. It's not just you, me, and someone else sat around having a chat about good old days and joking about all the negatives. It's actually constructive and beneficial. I struggle to find, except for being named and shamed on a regular basis, it's a wonder I'm still around, something negative about it, because I think it's great. And as you will back me up on the stats, I'm sure, but the number of people that start podcasts, and I include myself in that, it's something I've tried to do. One of the reasons that I stopped was you're good at it. So, why have a dog and bark yourself? If there's someone who's good at it, let's support them and make that a really good thing. Yeah, it's great. So no, I'd love to slate it. You've even got decent taste in Marvel films. I really can't win.
The recent Guardians of the Galaxy 3 film knocked the Eternals out of my top 10. And so, yeah, I think what you want about my Marvel taste in films. One of the things that, in fact, I've been talking a lot to my premium members recently about how I listen to podcasts and kind of encourage them to do the same. In that you mentioned about between lessons stuff. It's like I listen to podcasts almost passively, and it's like sometimes there'll just be something that I find interesting, or it might lift my spirits, or it'll get me thinking. But there'll be an episode that I go, no, I'm listening back to that, and then I listen with a notepad and pen, or whatever, however I make notes. And I think that's the great thing about podcasts, is why part of the reason why I do podcasts, because you can do that. It's really easy to do that. And as you mentioned, you can rewind, you can skip, you can pause, you can go 10 minutes and go, no, not for me, and move on or whatever. But I want to ask you just a little bit about guests. There's been loads of guests. Keir Witherspoon was an awesome guest back on season 1, for example. Random choice of guests there. But have you got any favourite guests, Chris? Anyone that stands out to you? Not necessarily one above all, but just a few that stand out potentially.
Here, when I listened for the second time, really liked him. Sometimes you're not in the right space. It's like watching a film, isn't it? I was quite About a Boy. First time, thought it was crap. Second time, changed my life, genuinely, the way that I approach stuff. I think my problem is I'm lousy with names, so I'm trying to think. But it's the variety of things, though. It's not necessarily the people. It's the subjects. I think have been chosen really well. I think it's been the mix of out of industry and in industry. The wrestling guy,
Sprocker.
Thank you. That I enjoyed that, and actually went off and listened to a couple of his other podcasts. I haven't got capacity to listen to all of them, but I enjoyed it absolutely. And I think trying to think who other ones were that were really standout, going back to sort of those early days of them. There was a marketing guy, and I can't think of his name, that I think I listened to 3 times, because it was, as you said, I listened to it passively, and then when actually I need to sit down and do this again. And then later on, when I'm going to go back to it, and I don't do that often, there's always something new and shiny. I like the new and shiny stuff. I will do the sit down and listen to it properly. I do it with audiobooks as well. So yeah, I it's just been the mix of stuff, and possibly a bit too much veganism in there for me. But apart from that, I don't think there are any that I genuinely haven't enjoyed.
Across 145 episodes, I've mentioned veganism 3 times. That's not too much. That's a completely acceptable ratio.
The number one, which goes against the grain slightly, because my number one choice would be the DVSA episode, which what I love is the fact that it's not industry based, but for quality interviewing and being able to challenge someone without offending them, I think you did a cracking job, and I enjoyed that because of that. It wasn't because of the content necessarily, it was because of the delivery. So all right, I will continue to praise you. I want to find something negative. I'm working on it.
I want to know who the other guy was, but I haven't got enough to work on with marketing. It'll come somewhere. I'm slightly surprised you didn't say more about the people you then went on to work with in G. Sabini Roberts.
Oh. No, but then that gives you the credit of the fact that basically what I need to do is not think about your podcasts. I need to think about all the awesome things that I've put in place since, because I've stolen them from you. Yes, no, G, absolutely. I don't think we could ever turn the industry upside down and totally change things, but they keep coming back to kind of not haunt us. I don't want to say that because it sounds really bad, but it keeps coming back again, and little things come up that the roots of them, I'll give you the credit, were with you and the fact that you'd engaged with the Queer Box and the LGBTQ plus course, which is an awesome course. DITC members get it for 20 quid off, so that is a absolute steal. And it will change your business and your perspective. I guarantee it. So yeah, absolutely, and that it's those little breadcrumbs that change the industry, not big, massive things. All credit to you, but I will steal it slightly.
I mean, some I've been reflecting on a lot recently around the podcast as a whole, and I'll maybe touch on that a bit more in a second. But just like regarding the guest, when I think of this, I just look at the caliber, and again, I'm thinking outside of our industry at the minute, because I think that people outside the industry, it's a tough sell for me to get them to come and speak to driving instructors, and I can imagine them just thinking, well, what am I going to get from this? But they don't. They're okay, cool. And I just look at some of the people, and Simon Hartley. This is a guy that works with like Premier League clubs and Bundesliga clubs and rugby union, and I think it was with the England rugby union team. And I just think, it's like, we come and join me. Yeah, no problem. When can we do it? Same with Dan Meredith. He's someone I've been trying to get on since season 1, but we've had to reschedule every time. But like this time, it's like, no, we are definitely doing it this season. We got him in for last episode. People like Shabnam Raja and Jess Soto, just people of such quality in their field that are so established. Someone else has come on this season, Adil Amazi, who, this guy this month has officially now made $1 billion for his clients as a copywriter. I'm like, talk about success, and he's coming on to give us as driving instructors advice. And I just think, what a privileged position we're in, that people are willing to do this, and we can, just cherry pick these bits of information. But, it's coming back to the podcast as a whole for a second. I said this on the episode with Dan Meredith, but I'm going to say it again now, because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about, or where we're going to go with this next. Because back on season 1, when I kind of realized there was going to be a second season, I set myself some goals, and there were 3 big goals. So one was to do 5 seasons, which I've now completed. The other was to get 10% of the industry listening, which I considered between 3,600 and 4,000 people, and I achieved that this season. So 4,000 people have listened this season, and the other was to get Dan Meredith on. So I ticked all 3 of those goals, and it's kind of really got me thinking and looking at the podcast, and as I say, all the stuff it's become. So it's not just a podcast anymore. I think of it now as, it's called a podcast, but it's training, it's development. That's what it is. It's got your podcast, you've got your premium, you've got your live events in person, you've got your live events online. It's all the stuff that goes around it. And I was also considering the phrase that we've said a lot, we hear a lot about things not being fit for purpose. The theory test, the driving test, the standards check, audit, all this stuff that we say is not fit for purpose. And I got to thinking about the Instructor Podcast. I thought, it's not fit for purpose anymore. It's evolved, it's developed, it's not fit for purpose. And then I had a rethink, and I'm like, that's not right. The purpose has changed. From that original goal way back on season 1, which was to talk to people that I wanted to talk to, and to speak to a couple of 100 driving instructors, and just to provide a bit of information and a bit of inspiration, it's evolved into so much more than that. And the big thing for me now is I have zero idea what the purpose of the instructor is anymore. I call it the instructor now because it's the podcast, the premium, all this stuff. At the minute, I have zero idea what that is. So there will be changes afoot. I have no idea what yet, because it's still very much up in the air. So I'm going to throw this over to you, Chris, and you may not have an answer, and that's completely fine. What would you like to see? Is there any difference? Is there anything new you'd like to see me or the instructor, or anything in those kind of facets take on or evolve into?
I would love to see blind interviews where you don't know who the person is at all, and you've got to figure it out. You can't, you've got to interview them through to figure out what they are and what they do, and their job is to make it as difficult as possible. I think that would be awesome, because that's what I enjoy. It might be because I know you, but I think it's because you're good at it. Is the process of, I hate it when I'm sat on side of it, and you then ask me a question about what I said, because the mouth moves, the brain doesn't always keep up. But that kind of I like that. It's also, I like the suffering on your face when you say that you feel that it's not fit for purpose, but you don't know what it is, because typical dual control freak, you want to have your plan, and you want to know. I love the opposite. I love not knowing stuff. Just explore it and see where it goes. I hate it if it involves going somewhere and meeting people, but I enjoy not necessarily knowing what opening that door is gonna do. So I'd like to explore your suffering slightly, and see more of that. To answer the earlier question, I muddled two people slightly. So it wasn't marketing; it was business. It was Dino.
It's that, Talia.
Yes, and because the reason I got the marketing was who I still follow and engage with on a regular basis. Amanda Leake was on the marketing, and that's why I was thinking, because they were around the same kind of time.
Another two awesome people. In particular, I'd recommend anyone listen now, go and follow Amanda Leake. She puts awesome stuff up, loads of stuff for free. I'll leave that there. But it's interesting you say that, because I don't need to know the destination, but I need to know the road I'm on. I need to know where that road is starting to take me. I don't care where it takes me in the end. I don't have to have a goal as such. That evolves as I go, but at the minute, I don't even know what road I want to take. And I think that's going to be the interesting thing over the next few months. I'm going to see if anyone else wants to come in just a second, but I'm going to touch on one more point first, because I'm going to say this, but I'm going to sound like a pretentious dick when I say it. So, I'd be interested in your comebacks. I genuinely believe, no, that's not a belief thing. It's a fact, because I've seen it and I've witnessed it and I've been told it and I've seen it firsthand. The Instructor Podcast has changed the way some people, not everyone, some people train and learn and develop. I had a brilliant question recently by one of my premium members, Kev Lyons, who asking me about video content. Can people learn just from, could someone become an instructor just by using video training? And it's just a fascinating thought process around it. And I think that, like I say, there are people that are changing the way they learn because of the podcast and the stuff around it. And I've also think, and I can't prove this one, so this is more of a belief than a knowledge, but I think there's training companies that are tweaking and changing what they're doing because of what they're seeing going on over here. I think they're a little bit slow to do it. And I go back to the original reason of this podcast, because the resource wasn't there. So I've put the resource there, and I think some people have seen how it's worked and then gone into it. Some people have seen, I'll go back to what you were saying about your starts on podcasts. I sometimes get these slightly wrong, but I'm pretty sure 50% of podcasts don't get past the third episode, and 80% don't get past episode 10. And if you go onto Apple or Spotify and type in Driving Instructor Podcast, after you get past all mine, you'll see all the ones that have done like 3 or 4 episodes, including ADI Stories, which I did, which one did too. So, that one fell by the wayside. So I think that people, I think what happened at the beginning was people tried it, didn't immediately get the results, and gave up. And I think people are starting to see that you put the work and the effort, and if you're actually, oh God, horrible thing to say, if you're actually good at it, then you can achieve stuff. But I'd just be interested in your thoughts on that, Chris, whether you've seen that impact in the training that I was mentioning.
Yes, I think that you've filled a void, and therefore people couldn't use it before it existed. So the fact that people are listening, the fact that there's a choice now, in the same way of your question about can you learn to be an instructor via videos alone, or could you learn to drive via videos alone? Could you? Yes. Is it a good idea? Probably not. You probably need more than, but it can form a foundation of things. Absolutely. In the same way, could you do it via just listening to podcasts? Yes, if you can find the right content. What I like to think you've done more than anything is moving away from that core syllabus of, we don't actually teach people to be a driving instructor. We teach them how to pass the test. And then the other stuff, hopefully, if people have been trained well, they realize they need more and they continue to access it as they go forwards. You're part of that. I know that every PDI that I work with, I don't necessarily train. It's not just training ones, but ones that I help with bits of finding stuff. All of them get told, there's the resource, go and use it, because it opens up a lot of other doors. And by giving people choices, the world is a better place. Because if you don't have a choice, then you don't get to do it. You don't get to make that choice, which goes back to something that there's probably less than 100 big things that have changed my life, especially my driving instructor life. Things that I hold on to, and one of them was Lou Walsh came to do a course that I was running, and there was a conversation going on, and I think someone said, surely all driving instructors want their pupils to be safe. And she said, in the way that she does, actually, I think I want my pupils to be able to choose to drive dangerously. Because if they're just doing what they're told, they're not nearly as safe as if they're able to make that choice. You've given a choice to driving instructors that is to not follow that model that was been there for so long. In all right, coaching kind of came into it a bit and client-centered a bit, but actually it's the same model. You've opened things up to go, after I qualify, there's a world out there that I know nothing about and I can go and find. So yeah, there's influence in there, absolutely.
It's interesting. I think that I mentioned this in a podcast recently. I'm going to say it again, that I spent too long worrying about the people that weren't listening and trying to win those over. And this season, I genuinely believe I've delivered my best content yet. And this season has been about providing for the people that currently listen. Because if I provide for those people, that's going to attract new people anyway. And I genuinely believe it's my best. But you did make me chuckle there, and I'm going to tell you why. You said about filling your void, and it reminded me of a student I had just a few days ago, and she's Irish, and someone was tailgating us, and she went to say, the guy behind's up my ass. But she paused because she didn't want to be rude and said, the guy behind's up my hole. I'm like, I think that's ruder. I think that's worse. Which was, I don't know, let me chuckle.
That reminds me of one of my early pupils who she had a mouth on her. She really did. She had a lovely character. She had a mouth on her, and it was, he's right up my chuff, which I've never forgotten. Stayed with me for a long time.
So I'm going to bring in Phil Cowley for a moment now. Phil, what are your thoughts on the Instructor Podcast?
Well, first, I would like to add to those stories, because I had one of my driving instructors was out with a pupil, and they were going back to the village, and there was 2 ways in through the village, and the pupil said, "Would you like me to take you up the back way?" The instructor's response was quite amusing. But yeah, no, I love the podcast, obviously. I seem to remember sitting back, because I've listened to podcasts for way before I was a driving instructor. So naturally, when I was a driving instructor, I thought, oh, let's see, there's a podcast I can listen to. And there was, and all due to that podcast, it was out there and it was doing its thing. And I loved it for a long time. And I was gradually getting a bit it was getting a bit samey, and I was getting bored of it. And I felt like I was listening to it because I felt like I had to try and get some information about the industry. It felt like I was a job to listen to it. Like I needed to make sure I was keeping up to date. And then you came along. And filled that.
Like a rom-com.
Yeah, basically. And yeah, it's kind of everything that it needed to be, and stuff that I wouldn't have known I needed as well. I think I described this on a different podcast the other day, talking about you, how you managed to sort of kind of find stuff that I didn't know I needed, and then I'm like, why have I not had that in my life all the time, sort of thing. So I wouldn't have been able to think to go and have a look for that information myself, I think. So I think like that creation. And I've been out and I've actioned most of it, which I don't think I would do with many other things. So it's clearly good content and good people you're bringing on, because it's enough that it's made me want to go and work with those people. And so, for example, all my logos and stuff are done by Ian Blakeman. I've been and done Sam Harper's course. I put LGBT stuff on my website. So yeah, I've got my accountant, my bookkeeper is Dave. So it's sort of like it's made me want to go work with those people, and I think that's partly because you get to hear them. So you get a personal connection, and you think, yeah, that person like sounds like somebody I want to work with. So it's not just like them trying to sell their products.
Do you know, I think it's worth giving a shout out, because I always have. I have right since episode 1. So Dipod, I still listen to Dipod. I think it's does what it does. I think they provide some useful information. They occasionally have some good guests on, and I do like listening to them. And whether this is coincidental or whether this is connected, I will leave up to you. But they were monthly. They've started going more than monthly since I've grown. You read into that what you will. And I believe, I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, Phil, but I believe that the podcast you're referring to, it was the XL podcast, where I was described as having a premium package, which was lovely to hear.
It was. I don't remember if that was me or Kevin that mentioned
it was
that.
Kevin, I think.
Okay.
You did miss your opportunity there, because when you were going through that really lovely monologue, you could have finished with, and he's got a premium package. But I am going to go back and clip that and put some lovely romantic music behind it, because that was lovely. Yes, you mentioned a few that you've taken up there, but is there any that stand out to you as a particular favourite, or one that had an influence?
Loads. I think, like Chris said, the DVSA episode was brilliant. Just because I've never heard anyone get so much information from someone from the DVSA in one go. So that was quite impressive. I loved Lee's podcasts, both of them, particularly his first one, because I think his story resonated with me quite nicely. And I think actually as well, it's another good one where it proves the whole point behind being able to get to know the person before going to use him. And I've recommended him to people up that way. And I've said, go listen to his episode first and then see if you want to work with him, sort of thing. So you're not just having to go in blindly. You get to go and get a feel for the person first. I loved Sarah Hall's episode, not necessarily because I took anything away from it learning, but it was just a fun episode and a nice story, and I liked her story. The people perspective episode was brilliant as well, and then I love Dan's Meredith's episode, which I need to go back and listen to at some point. That's one that I want to take notes.
Yeah, I was actually planning on giving a special shout out to the pupils perspective, because that was I think that every guest I've had on, they've either been an instructor type expert, so obviously they fall into the rhythm of talking quite easily, or they've been an expert from outside, in which case they're talking about their expertise. But the two students I had that came on to talk, that must have been ridiculously hard for those, because I've given them the mandate of talking to instructors about your perspective of learning to drive and what you want from driving instructors, and be as cruel or as kind to me as you see fit. And I thought they were phenomenal, both of them, Julia and Charlotte. Charlotte's been on twice. She did the social media episode as well, but they were both phenomenal. So definitely wanted to give a little shout out to them. I'm also just going to mention it amused me slightly referring to Lee there, because you two have something in common. Lee did an episode with me once and I lost it. And you did an episode of it once, and the audio was that bad we had to re-record, and that's the only times that ever it's gone that extreme wrong. So there you go. Anything else you want to chuck in there, either about the Instructor Podcast or anything we were talking about earlier, Phil?
I would like to ask Chris how he uses his buzzer for his PDI sessions.
Anytime it makes that noise, just so we can't cut it out. Anytime the buzzer is pressed, the world's frozen. We choose a safe moment to do it. I'll just say that to cover myself. And the PDI trainer in the back, or examiner, if we're sort of pretending we're the examiner, and the pupil all have to be able to write on a postcard what the goal is at that moment in time and who is responsible for what that job share is, because it should be outward and everybody should know. So yeah, it's an exercise in making sure that everybody is on the same page. It gets used for other things, and actually there's a better tool than that, which is easier to put in your pocket, which is a sound box. And if you haven't got a sound box, get one. They're like 10 quid on Amazon, and they are awesome. You get 20 different sound effects, and you can buzz them and bing them and have crashing noises and all sorts. Best thing I've ever bought.
Love it. I'm definitely stealing that idea. I'm gonna have fun in the car next session.
I'll send Terry a link to the soundbox, because there's a group of them, and you want the good one. Some of them, the Halloween one, although certain people would love the Halloween sound effects, it doesn't quite work for driving instructing.
So I'm coming over to Tony Baker now. Tony, what would you like to chuck my way?
Well, I mean, I've joined you recently, the Instructor Podcast and Premium. It came at a really good time for me, because I found you. I think I might have found you through something Emma might have said to me. Emma Cottingham, I work in her school. But I was a victim of the try coaching malarkey. And I was almost 3/4 of the way through my BTEC, and I love doing that. And all of a sudden it come to an end. So I needed something else. And actually, that's the way I look at your podcast, your Instructor Podcast. I've learned so much from them. And the faces that are on the screen now are the ones that I've learned most from. If you sort of had included Bob and Neil Whiteman, then that would be complete at the moment to date for me. So I've learned so much from all of you guys, and I've watched a lot of your videos, Phil, and I loved your session, Chris, on roundabouts. I learned a lot of that, and I still chuckle about you saying, I want you to do two things. I want you not to hit anything and be predictable. And that is so true. And it works a treat with my guys. But I could go on and on, Terry, but don't ever feel that you're not hitting the mark, please, because the guests you have on are phenomenal. And I'm driving myself nuts listening to the podcast. I bought myself a little bit of earphones and I take the dog for it. I'm on it all the time. I've really gone unsociable. Not that I ever was, but Terry, I just want to say thank you, and thanks to the guys, because you have a way of getting the stuff that they need. It makes you feel like you're not on your own. It makes you feel that you're not on your own in this job, where you can just listen and hear people having the same problems as you and feeling the same way about things. It's so useful. It really is so useful. So it's a really thank you for that. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And I think probably a lot of people think the same.
Oh, I appreciate that, but I'm going to interpret that as the fact that I can stop trying now and I can just keep whack of it.
You won't do that.
No, I appreciate that, Tony. Thank you. I'm going to come back to you for one more question, Phil, specifically for you, because you have been listening to the podcast for a while. You've been on the podcast. You've recently taken over the ADI Book Club, and anyone wants to get involved in that, either contact Phil or join the Instructor Podcast Facebook group. And just a tip, answer the questions and click you agree to the rules, because if you don't, you get rejected. And I've currently got 78 people I need to reject. So, whatever. But Phil, you've also been a premium member for quite a while. So do my marketing for me. Tell me why people should join up the premium membership.
So because there's so much content, really, the yeah, it's got everything. It's got the business side of it. And I've been doing this job for ages. And then I listened to your sort of alternative route stuff, and it just sparked an idea. And I go off and do something. And then the standards check stuff is great. And I'm sure you're going to finish it at some point. There's just so much content in there from so many great people who are there. And again, it's like that sort of kind of the highlights of the podcast, isn't it? Really, the guys you want to get back on and listen to over and over again. So it's just sort of great CPD, and not free CPD because you've got to pay for it, but it could not be more value than I can think of. You've got to make. I think you've talked about this before, where you make your money back, because if you implement the stuff that you're learning on there, you'll be earning more money, and therefore you'll be making your money back on the podcast. So yeah, it's a no-brainer for me to join. It was a no-brainer for me to join to the next one. If nothing else, just to support you to have more time to do this stuff, because I find this stuff very valuable.
I genuinely appreciate that, and I agree that anyone that signs up to premium stuff, if you spend a few months and actually watch or listen or read whatever it is you're doing, and even just with the podcast, just with this, if you actually take something away from every episode or where you can and implement that thing, you will be in a better position, whether that's financially, health, mental, physical, whatever. We've been speaking a lot about recently, sort of behind the scenes, about mental health and stuff. Well, there are mental health episodes through the one this season with Hannah Mae Campbell. Awesome episode. You can go to that and listen. You can take away 3 or 4 free key points. You can go on action. You can ignore everything else and put your priority on that, and then you'll be in a better mental position, which will then enable you to work harder and work better and work smarter. And guess what? Your income goes up accordingly, and you've got a better work-life balance. Everyone's a winner. So, I appreciate that, Phil. Thank you. Anything you want to? Sorry, go on.
Sorry, can I just add one more thing that I thought while you were talking there? And I think I've noticed this probably more so in the last 6 months or so, that it's also starting to build a bit of a community. And I don't know if this is just because I am getting involved, but there's certainly with the Facebook group, and you start seeing the same people commenting and things like that. And it's a community of really good, nice people. So it's quite nice from that perspective. I've found a whole different world of instructors that I didn't know about. And so I think that's quite a nice part of like being part of that community.
I'm really pleased you said that, and thank you. It's intentional, and it stems back to something. And if this is preachy, I apologise, but whatever. Something I used to be really bad at is I'd put a post out and no one responds to it, so you don't put another post out. And I learned that it's not necessarily that people aren't responding because it's not good. It's because they're not responding to that one, or they need to see more, or they're too shy to respond, or whatever. You need to do it consistently, and that's what I've done on the Facebook page, on the Facebook group. Not as much in the other socials I do, but I've done it over there. I took a break on the group for a little while I was struggling, but it's all friendly, it's all pleasant, it's all helpful, and it's all welcoming. And I think that anyone listening, if they want to grow a community or want to grow a following, that's what you need to do. You will put posts out that no one responds to. It doesn't matter. I get messages sometimes from people that say, I don't want to put this publicly, but, and then they'll say it. And that's how it grows. And the other thing that I will say is, I said it jokingly, but it's true. I've got a long list of people that I haven't accepted into that group because they haven't bothered just agreeing. They'll answer the questions. They'll actually type out the answer to the questions, but they haven't clicked I agree to the rules. And one of the rules I created in that group is don't be a dick. Well, if you're not willing to go, I'm not going to be a dick in your group. You're not coming in the group. Simple as that. So that's I've said before, that's the minimum standard I live my life by, not being a dick. But, there you go. So I appreciate you saying that. Anything you want to add on to that, Tony?
No, I just love it. I just love the involvement. I think actually Phil's just suggested something there, which is quite true. Is there is a community? It's a go-to place when we've been on our own all day with students, and I love it. I do. I really enjoy it. And there isn't one podcast that I've not enjoyed.
There's been a couple that I've not enjoyed, but I'm not going to name them. I'll be honest. Yeah, so no, I mean, look, the community was intentional, and what I will say, it's not the biggest Facebook group in the world. I've never intended it to be. The intention was always a nice little place where I can showcase some other people a different way. The goal was always to give people an opportunity. You know, we've done that with you recently, Phil, with the ADI Book Club. You know, and that was the goal around it. So yeah, I appreciate that, you guys. Chris, we've neglected you for a little bit. Anything you want to chuck into anything that's been said there?
I exactly that. It's always been a pleasure to have the opportunity to have a chat with someone that generally I get on with. And you know, it is, yeah, it's a, I think going back to the not needing to have a point, not needing to necessarily have that direction, isn't that the thing about community, is that it's about having things around you that you're part of. You don't necessarily have to even engage. And that's something that I've also found with, you know, the communities that I've been part of and been, you know, been able to engage with. It's the silent people are the ones that then, you know, will get in touch with you, and you realize they are listening. I think that's the sad thing about podcasts, is you get figures, you get to see who's listening, because sometimes that puts people off, or it becomes too much about the figures. But I think what that does then tell you is that, you know, that people out there want to hear it. They want to hear that stuff. And that is all, you know, it's about having a voice in the car, a voice in the room. There's a lot of instructors that, you know, that haven't got a family, that they're out of work and then they go home, and yeah, it gives them engagement and contact and things like that. It's all really important, and we lack it so much in the industry. When, you know, yeah, your pupils are lovely, but it's not. Well, firstly, it's not appropriate to go down the pub with them, generally speaking. But they're not the sort of people that you can talk on that open level with. And we all know about the boundaries, that it's a really difficult thing. So it just gives people engagement, and that's awesome. It really is. So long may it last. And I love watching. I'd love to be more engaged, but you know, I find I'm spinning so many plates. I love being able to look in sometimes and seeing all the great stuff that's going on, and say the opportunities that are being given to more and more people. That's really great, really great.
It's the interesting thing around the stats there, and I've kind of been reflecting on this season more than previously, but we actually spoke about it on the episode with Haley Field on sleep, in that we said during the episode that episode would not get anywhere near as big a download numbers as the Standards Check episode would do. And I used to be a bit reluctant. I still did it, but out of reluctance to do those episodes. But then it's like, well, hold on. There's literally still hundreds of people listening to this episode on sleep. Why should I deprive those hundreds of people that want to listen to this, because not everyone does? And it's been interesting with I'm going to put the link in the show notes. It's actually on the survey. I put a survey out and asked people to fill that in for feedback on the podcast. And I put the question up, how often do you listen? I think the options are every episode, most, pick and choose, and occasionally. And it seems to be either every episode or pick and choose. And I think that's a really good mix. I like that. But I'm going to bring it back over to Michelle, because I know Michelle has something to say after moving her car. So what would you like to throw my way, Michelle?
I sort of forgot. I ran downstairs and come up and thought I wanted to say something, and then I forgot. But just pretty much adding to what everybody else has said, actually. I don't even know how I actually started listening to your podcasts, but all I know is yours was the first ever podcast I'd listened to. So one of my friends listens to podcasts all the time. She's like, listen to them. And I never bothered until yours. And then there's so much content and so much variety of information. And I've I've sort of, like everybody else, I've used so Bob Morton, I've joined his, so I pay for his and listen to the coaching and doing the courses on that. That's San Harper, yeah. So I've done her course. I think I've joined onto Chris's IDTC. I've joined that as well. So I think it's just opened up a lot of things that, even though I was aware about, maybe not sort of delved into it so much, but sort of listening to your podcasts when I can, has really sort of opened up my thoughts and sort of pushed me to do probably more than what I would have done without having this podcast. So it's has been very enlightening and very, very helpful on there. Other than that, I can't remember what my original thought that I was going to say to you was.
Oh. No, that's lovely to hear, Michelle. Thank you. I do appreciate that, and I appreciate all the comments from you guys. Obviously, Chris is a regular on the show, but the thing we've introduced this season is doing some of these shows live in front of an audience, and occasionally giving you guys the opportunity to chip in. So I appreciate you guys supporting the show and the comments and feedback you've given today. We do need to wrap up now, so I'm just going to take a moment to remind everyone that I pointed out, I think on the last episode, that if you have listened all the way to the end of this episode, you are officially my favourite people, and you become officially an elite listener. And yes, I will get some badges made up for you all at some point. So if you meet me and say, Terry, I'm an elite listener, you can have an elite listener badge, but only if you listen all the way to the end of the show, because that's the only way you'll find out. So, just a quick moment to say thank you for you guys. Really appreciate it. And anyone that's listening and going, oh, how self-indulgent is he? And he just wants praise. I have asked several times for negative comments today. So screw you all. And thank you for listening.
The Instructor Podcast with Terry Cook. Talking with leaders, innovators, experts and game changers about what drives them.